here's something that I really want to discuss. And it relates to the American elections, the presidential elections that are coming up by next year, which is not too long from now. And the candidates are campaigning now. And that is Citizens United. Citizens United is one of the most disgusting legislations that I've ever witnessed be passed in the House of Congress and in the government in general. If you're unfamiliar with Citizens United, it is the legislation that allowed corporations to give as much money as they wanted to a political campaign, because what the legislation did was that it recognized corporations as individuals who had the capacity to pay and fund these candidates. Now, before we begin, I'd like to state my endorsement of Bernie Sanders. For as far as we know, he hasn't gotten any political support from corporations. In fact, his whole campaign is to go against Wall Street, to go against these big corporations that have hijacked the American system. And I agree completely with Bernie Sanders. Yet, one thing that has stood out to me is that corporations have so much influence in American politics that is almost unbelievable. They have control of the media. They have control of how well funded our candidates are. And they also influence the decisions that these candidates make and what agendas they will address. Now, one thing that makes me scared every day I think of it is the idea that corporations influence the media. Now, America has prided itself with the idea of freedom of speech and freedom of press, freedom of religion. To some extent, I do agree with all those. In fact, I endorse free speech, very much so. But the main issue in America is that the corporations have immense power over what is published and what gets out. I mean, you can make a blog right now and just write about anything. But will it gain publicity? Will people read it? Not as much as, say, CNN or Fox News. Why? Because those entities are much more well-funded than your own personal blog. Now, the problem is that media sources have a bias towards a certain candidate. And say CNN would side with Hillary Clinton, while Fox News would side with Jeb Bush or maybe even Donald Trump, but that's debatable. Now, the essence of this issue is that corporations now have one of the greatest powers that any individual can have, and that is the power of knowledge. We live in a society today that relies so much on information. People say in articles in the New York Times and The Economist have said that we live in the information era. This is the post-internet .com bubble era. Some argue that this is the post-capitalist era, where now what is the most valuable resource is not material resource, but of information. How do we distribute information? How do people get information, and what information is being given? The problem is that in a democracy, everyone needs to know the same things. Everyone needs to have their own opinions. But the problem with corporate media and Western media, mainstream media, is that they provide opinions. They say, here is what we want you to believe, and believe what we are telling you, and take in that opinion and spread the word. That is what media has become. It isn't, here is what happened, interpret it with your own opinions, and then spread the information based on what you believe. That's not the case anymore. People listen, like liberals would spend more time reading articles on CNN than, say, on Fox News. I mean, hell, would liberals even go on CNN in the first place? Probably not. So the issue today is not corporations completely, but it's the power that we have granted to corporations because of their wealth. Now, I don't want to go on a rant about the flaws of the free market, even though I do, to some extent, see flaws in the free market. I mean, no system is flawless. However, we need to put a stop in how corporations control everything we see. It is either that or the individuals in America and around the world must have this sense of skepticism for when they listen to or read news sources apart from their own opinions. Diversify what you read, diversify what you listen, diversify who you talk to, challenge your own ideas. Because the only way that we can save American democracy is if we protect information. We are slowly entering a world that George Orwell brought up in 1984. That what we are told, we believe. Does 2 plus 2 equal 5? No. But if the government tells us, or if the corporations tell us, or if the news tells us that 2 plus 2 is 5, we're going to believe that. That's the whole social experiment that is being placed upon us, and we are the test subjects. So don't allow that to happen. Stand up for your own good. American democracy is in peril. Your freedom of thought is in peril. It's time that you take a stand. Now, I'm not telling you to grab red flags and start marching down to Capitol Hill. But when you're at home and you're reading your own news sources or whatever, start reading alternative sources. Challenge your own view. That's all I have to ask you to do. That's my thoughts on corporate influence and how it has affected us. We can't destroy corporations. That would be disastrous. But we have to not let corporations destroy us and defend what little freedom we have left in this world. Remain skeptical and remain free in your brain, in your thoughts. Because that's the only place that will ever be free, even when the world is taken over by some oppressive government or by some oppressive corporation. For our mind is what gives us the capacity to learn, to care, to love. But it isn't what corporations want us to do. So take a stand. That's all I ask for you.